Important development. So that video of Limpopo Health MEC, Dr. Phophi Ramathuba, that's recently gone viral, has certainly sparked debate around issues of law, ethics and governance this week. In that clip, Ramathuba can be heard berating a Zimbabwean national who's seeking medical assistance at Bilabila Hospital. Now, the South African Medical Association has condemned the MEC's actions, citing the pledge made by healthcare professionals, but also questions surrounding the National Health Act and its provisions for foreign nationals gaining access to healthcare services here has also come under the spotlight. So what should we make of this exchange? Well, the SA Medical Research Council Ethicist and Professor for Bioethics and Health Law at Wits School of Clinical Medicine is Professor Ames Dhai, who joins us via our video link this morning. Prof, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for your time and patience. So there's the Constitution, Section 27 more specifically, that talks about healthcare provision for all. There's also the National Health Act and the Health Professionals Act. Your first take on whether or not the MEC was justified here, what do you say?
Well, good morning to you and your listeners. The MEC was definitely not justified in ranting her frustrations to a patient. That was cold and callous, and it really saddens me that she used her power to exploit the vulnerability of a patient lying on a bed there. I mean, the patient was totally helpless. And she did that because she knew the patient could not react to her. It would have been appropriate to take her rantings to someone on her level, or to the Minister of Health, or to the President of the country, or even to the leader of the country from which this patient came. But not, not do what she did to the patient in a hospital ward, considering there were other patients around, and there was her team around her that actually stood and laughed, assuming one of us was on that bed. Exactly how would we have felt?
Yeah, I hear that, Prof. And, I guess part of what we need to do here is also at some stage acknowledge what she was raising, even if perhaps we criticize her lack of sense of occasion, as it were. I've heard many people over the week gone by saying that perhaps she may have had a point in the content of her comments, but was just directing it to the wrong person. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Absolutely. She does have a point in that, yes, a substantial amount of our healthcare budget goes into treating patients from different countries. However, we must look at why our healthcare budget actually is what it is, and why we can't actually have proper delivery of healthcare in this country. We look at inefficiencies, we look at mismanagement, we look at corruption. We need to know exactly what the proportion of our healthcare budget goes into managing foreign nationals. And I think there ought to be a government-to-government agreement whereby the governments could then claim from the government of the foreign national. But when a patient comes in to see a doctor and a patient is ill, the doctor cannot look at the patient as a foreign national. What the doctor sees in front of him or her is a patient. A patient is a patient, whom we've all taken oaths to manage in the patient's best interest, to respect our patients, to respect their intrinsic worth and value. And what she did was she belittled this patient.
Sure.
One may say, well, she was not actually treating the patient. She was not involved in a doctor-patient relationship. Fine, she wasn't. But she was totally out of line in attacking a patient rather than the government of the patient, who can't honor the responsibility of looking after their patients.
Yeah.
Just like we in our country, our government doesn't honor its responsibility in ensuring that we have access to healthcare for all in our country.
Right. In fact,
all South Africans too.
Yeah. A point had been made earlier this week that even if the last foreign national was to leave this country, those snaking queues in some of our clinics wouldn't go away. But speaking about oaths that have been taken by doctors, there's also so much being said, Prof, about the capacity in which Phophi Ramathuba was making that comment. We know she is a medical doctor, but many people coming to her defense saying she was speaking there as a political head, as an MEC in the province. Does it matter to you the capacity in which she made those remarks, given her power and her position?
As I said, she could use that capacity in a different context. That was not the forum. What she did was she took politics to the patient's bedside. You don't take politics to the patient's bedside. You take ethics to the patient's bedside. And ethics cannot be replaced by politics at the bedside.
Yeah. Speaking about ethics, Prof, there's a question that I think most people are struggling to answer, so no pressure to you. I've wondered what happens in a context where a doctor is faced with limited resources and cannot treat every patient and is dealing with patients who have equal risk, for argument's sake. In that context, can something like someone's nationality guide what that doctor ought to do in that moment with ethics in mind?
Well, even if we're faced with resource constraints, when we have a patient in front of us, we look at the patient on the bed and we do what's in the best interests of the patient, what the patient really requires within our resource constraints as well. And we would treat that patient as we would treat any other patient in front of us within limited resource constraints.
Yeah, all right. So
if we've got to actually, rationalize healthcare, that must be done at a different level, but not at the bedside, no.
Fascinating. All right, Professor Ames Dhai, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Really do appreciate your time.